So what is a system? A system is a set of interrelated and interdependent parts arranged in a manner that produces a unified whole. Okay, the way this model is really formatted, it talks about inputs and then some type of process that takes place and then outputs, all right? And those are the key words we want to keep in mind. In this particular example, it talked about inputs coming from the environment, your own resources, your history. Then you've got some kind of strategy that takes place, and your company works with that, with its people, its structure, everything else, some kind of process change occurs, and then you output something, whether it's at the individual level, a new product, or something that's going out to your customers, whatever, right? There's some kind of input, process, and output. And we see this within our businesses all the time. McDonald's. Inputs are bread, meat, whatever it is they have there. They transform that into some type of Happy Meal or value meal, and that's what they're outputting, correct? And so that's this process we see over and over and over in business. This is actually the way a lot of our articles are going to be structured, and this is the way you should start to think about the issues and the topics that you're going to discuss, whether it's on the exam or through the cases when we get there as well. And so just as a couple of examples of this input, process, output, let's look at a couple of different things. When we get into some of these articles, you're going to see this type of process. You're going to see something like employee stress. You're going to say, look, the newspaper industry, Nordstrom's, these are stressful environments, right? Owning my own business, that's stressful. I've got employees now. How do I deal with that stress? So Professor Williams, I want to study employee stress. And so you can go out and you can get a definition on employee stress, and that's good. But what we really need to be thinking about this is from a systems standpoint. And really, what impacts employee stress, and what does employee stress impact? So really, that's what we want to think about when we're reading and doing these articles. So managerial support seems to have some type of effect on employee stress. So he's a manager, if he's there and he's always badgering his employees and you're 3 minutes late, why were you 3 minutes late? And I'm docking 3 minutes of your pay and you need to stay 3 minutes after work. You know, if he's that type of manager, what do you think that's going to do to employee stress? It's going to cause that to go up probably, right? And then their health is going to go down. And their performance is probably going to go down. And their intention to quit is probably going to go up. So we see this from a systems perspective now. And we can say these affect stress, and stress has this impact on these things within the organization. So when you're reading your articles and you get into other topics, that's good. That's a good thing. That's what you want to do. You don't want to read an article and just say, well, it only talks about stress in this one paragraph. No, that's fine. But what does it say impacts stress? What does it say stress leads to? That sort of thing is what we want to get to. How does personality affect stress? Well, if you have somebody that's really outgoing and they are in a job where they never talk to people, it's probably going to cause their stress to go up because they're not fulfilling that part of their personality. And that's probably going to cause, you know, making them have some kind of intention to quit. So we need to understand these things. I'm going to use an article by Wallumbwa, Hartnell, and Oak that came out in 2010. And just walk you through some of this stuff. So the title alone is a mouthful. Servant Leadership, Procedural Justice Climate, Service Climate, Employee Attitudes, and Organizational Citizenship Behavior. A cross-level investigation. This is in a very good journal. Journal of Applied Psychology is a very good journal. And we're just going to scroll through this article a little bit. And I'm going to just point out a few things that you'll see within this article. So it starts out by saying servant leadership, right? So that's probably what the main part of the article is going to be about. And here within the introduction, over on this side, we get a definition. Servant leadership is an emerging perspective in which to extend theory in OCB, or organizational citizenship behaviors research. Hale and Fields define servant leadership as an understanding and practice of leadership that places the good of those led over the self-interest of the leader, emphasizing leader behaviors that focus on follower development, and de-emphasizing glorification of the leader. So right away, they give us a definition of what we're talking about, this idea of servant leadership. All right, we go on a little bit further. That's just on page 1. On page 2 here, I think it's on page 2. Yes. On page 2, we get this model. And so this is really, if you find a model within your paper, that's a good thing. Most of the time when you find a model, you'll see the key constructs that are going to be dealt with within that model. So let's say that you are studying self-efficacy, and you find this article, you did some research, and self-efficacy came up within what you were trying to study. And so you have to define your terms, and you need to get a good understanding of these terms because you need to know how they are related to your topic of self-efficacy. Just as we'll talk about self-efficacy later on, but self-efficacy is basically this idea of how confident you feel that you can achieve the particular task at hand. So it's very specific to the task. Your confidence that you can get this particular task done. For example, if somebody came to me today from Harvard and said, hey, I need you to teach a course in management skills development, I'm going to feel pretty confident that I can get the job done. Am I going to be a little bit nervous? Yes, a different group of students perhaps, but I feel like I can probably get one class done in that. So that's fine. But if they came to me, or even if Texas A&M Commerce came to me and said, hey, we need you to teach a class in chemistry. Okay, now I'm a bit nervous, right? Because I don't feel like I could possibly get that done. I'm a good teacher. I'm a great teacher. Why am I selling myself short? But on the other hand, I know nothing about chemistry, very, very little about chemistry. And so that's why my self-efficacy would be down. So what this model is basically saying is that there's a group level that servant leaders impact, and then there's also this individual level that servant leaders impact. And so at the group level, servant leaders create this procedural justice climate. We'll talk about that later. Service climate, we'll talk about that later. But it's just this idea that they make this environment where it feels fair and an environment where you feel like you need to help others. Okay? All right. So then servant leaders at the individual level help people believe that they can accomplish whatever task they're trying to do, and they increase their commitment to the supervisor. You want to do more for your company because you feel committed to the person that's leading you. All right? And then all of those lead to the idea of organizational citizenship behavior, which is this idea of wanting to go above and beyond your job and doing more for the organization. Okay, so now we've got an idea of what all of these are about. But just giving those small definitions isn't what the article does. The article goes on and says, let me go on to it. And this is what you would be doing in your research as well, right here. Servant leadership and organizational citizenship behavior. So it's first tying the link between the input and the output, right? What's the relationship there? And it says organizational citizenship behavior is defined as individual behavior that is discretionary, not directly or explicitly recognized by the formal reward system, and that in the aggregate promotes the effective functioning of the organization. So then it goes on to explain what organizational citizenship behavior is and its relationship to servant leadership. So if you're reviewing this article, make sure you talk about that relationship. What organizational citizenship behavior is, how does the article describe that relationship? And as you can see, it's all right there. Then it goes on to talk about some of the other things: self-efficacy, commitment, and organizational citizenship behavior. So it's tying in, going back to our model, it's tying in this relationship, servant leadership, citizenship behaviors, and self-efficacy. So it ties in that relationship. So talk about those definitions and what that is about. And so as you can see, even from this part, even just the definitions and describing them and going in and figuring that part out, we're getting a good amount of information, right? And you're reading it and you're putting it into your own words, and so you should get some good information out of this. I would expect that everybody loves page numbers, but at this point, if you're just looking at this title and everything that's involved in it, I mean, we should at least have a page or two just on this. We haven't even gotten to the results of what they found yet, right? But at least the definitions, how these things, how they expect them to be related, we should have some good information within our paper already on that. So if you put this entire article into 2 sentences, something's wrong. If you put it into 1 paragraph, unless it's a paragraph that's 2 pages long, something is wrong. We see that now, right? And that's the level of detail that we're talking about. But you'll get that as you read through it. Okay, so you'll continue to do that. You're going through, you're reading it. You're saying, oh, this is why they think these two are related. This is how I can describe that relationship because this is what I understand after I read it. So you keep going, and you're going to run into a section down here called methods somewhere. Okay, methods. All right, so in the methods section of a paper, they describe what they actually tested, how they tested it, that sort of thing. So it says here, we used data collected from 7 multinational companies operating in Kenya to test the proposed theoretical framework. In other words, to test that model. It tells you a little bit about Kenya and why they chose that. And it says, our participants consisted of 815 full-time employees, constituting 123 work groups who completed surveys during regular work hours. So it tells you exactly how they tested it. Then they go on to tell you about the 52% were male, 48 were female, but that sort of makes sense, I guess. But they go on to tell you, what kind of degrees they had and what their jobs were, that sort of thing. So it's giving you an idea of who they asked. You do not have to get into the methods section. You don't need to tell me all about that. A lot of it's probably going to go over your head right now anyway. So you don't need to tell me, how many people they tested and who they tested and that sort of thing. Then you're going to get a section that talks about results. You probably need to at least look through this section. The first part is going to be a little bit above your head, but then you're going to start seeing things that said, this was confirmed or that was confirmed. But the main section you want to get to is discussion. All right. So when you get to the discussion session, so again, you've gone through the intro, you've gone through the part where they defined all their terms, so now you're understanding these different concepts that we're talking about. You're probably going to skip over the methods and the measurements and the results for the most part. But when you get to the discussion section, that's when they're going to tell you in business terms, for example, or in better terms, what their research actually found. Okay? So it says here, we found that servant leadership influences organizational citizenship behaviors through different mechanisms. We found evidence for procedural justice climate and service climate as moderators that amplify the influence of commitment to the supervisor on organizational citizenship behaviors. It may not make as much sense to you now, but once you've read the article and you know what those terms are about, that'll make more sense to you then. Our findings indicated that servant leadership was positively associated with OCB. So as servant leader, the greater the servant leader, the greater the type of citizenship behaviors that the people were doing. With this relationship partially mediated by employee perceptions of self-efficacy and commitment to the supervisor. So the greater the level of servant leadership, then the greater the people feel, or the individual feels about themselves, and the more committed they feel to the supervisor, so therefore they're going to do more for the organization. So it's starting to make a little bit of sense. It's still a little bit in more academic terms, but then you're going to start seeing some things that talk about it in normal business terms. From a practical point of view, our results provide insight into how servant leadership can be used to enhance employee citizenship behavior. Our findings suggest that servant leadership is instrumental in developing positive climates that can be used to enhance employee citizenship behavior in organizations. It follows that the effectiveness of leader programs aimed at enhancing procedural justice climate and service climate can be improved further by incorporating training and servant leadership skills. So it starts telling you how we can actually apply this to a business world. So if we know that, that what we really want is for people to start doing more than their job, which we're calling these organizational citizenship behaviors. Let me give you some examples of these just real quick. Like I said, we'll spend a day on this, but an example is on your job. Whose job is it to fill the coffee pot? Is there one person that's their job to fill the coffee pot? Not really. Is there one person that's their job to fill the copier when it goes out of paper. If you have to print something and you're the last person to use that printer, do you say, hey, Joe, I need you to come fill the paper again? Or do you just fill the paper? Those are citizenship behaviors. It's not your job to do this, but if you enjoy your work at the organization, you'll probably do these types of things. And what this particular model says, we have these leaders out there, these leaders, and in this paper they're calling them servant leaders. These servant leaders are people that seem to care a lot for their employees. They really go above and beyond for their employees. They're making sure you have the tools that you need to be successful. They're giving you a lot of power on the organization. They're saying your opinion matters. And if you have that type of leader, you're going to like the organization a lot more. And that's going to cause you to do two things. First, it's going to raise your self-efficacy and your ability to get your job done. But it's also going to lead to this idea of commitment. You really feel committed to your supervisor. So you love your supervisor so much, your manager so much, that you want to repay your manager for the things that they're doing. Okay? You really like the way they're leading you. I had a manager like this at IP. She was really good. At Easter time, we'd open up our desk and she's hidden all these plastic Easter eggs in there. Or I'd come in one day and she'd just send us and put a note on my desk on my keyboard. Hey, good job, Alex. Keep up the great work. And so these little things that she did made me just absolutely love her. I was really committed to her. But instead of going and putting Easter eggs in hers, I knew what she really wanted. She wanted me to do more for the organization, right? So that's how I show my appreciation to her, is by doing more for the organization. That's the business outcome that we get from what we're doing. All right. If I feel like I can do whatever I want to on my job, I've been empowered. People have taken care of me. I've been on this job for a while. I know the ropes because my leader has helped me do that. I'm going to show up to work and I just want to do more. So that's how these citizenship behaviors get done. And that's what this paper talks about. So the way we do this on our paper is you'd start by picking your topic, right? So you've chosen servant leadership. And so you find this article on servant leadership. You talk about servant leaders affecting organizational citizenship behaviors, and they do this through increasing the self-efficacy and the commitment. And we talk about what self-efficacy is. We talk about what commitment is. There's probably some kind of theory in there. What did the researchers show that it affects OCB, all this other stuff. And so you write about all that in your literature review. All right? Then you do the literature review for your other topics. And at the end of the paper, you go in and you then write about what is it called? Recommendations, okay? And so you would then recommend that one recommendation that I have is for leaders that to continue to try to use some of these servant leadership practices, because research shows that servant leadership leads to this and then leads to that. So you go back and you talk about what should be done based on the research that you've read, okay? Not, well, I think that my manager needs to be a servant leader because I don't really like him and everybody's trying to leave the organization. That has no bearing on what we're doing. On your papers, you focus on the research. You focus on the research. All right? All right, so again, what have we done here? We've talked about inputs, processes, and outputs, right? And so we start with a servant leader. That servant leader then works through the processes of self-efficacy and commitment to impact the organization, and the output is we've got employees that are dedicated to OCBs, right? So we can look at this from a true organizational perspective of raw materials, the process transformation and that, but it also applies to what we're doing on our articles.